So let's first of all get into what is a highly sensitive person. So this term, highly sensitive person, was coined by Dr. Elaine Aron, a clinical psychologist in California, who in 1997 published the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You. So what she did was, after she did her research, she developed a questionnaire to determine if someone is highly sensitive. And according to her research, around 15 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive. Now, as we know, INFJs are around 1–1.5% of the population. And a lot of INFJs do also fall into the category highly sensitive. So you've all taken the HSP test just now or a bit earlier. So what the HSP test does is to look at many different areas. And these areas examine 27 different questions, and a scoring of over 14, according to her, indicates that you are probably highly sensitive. So what the test itself does is to look at several different areas such as sensory input, other people's moods, loud music, adapting to last-minute changes, and chaotic scenes. So as we gathered tonight from all your submissions, INFJs are typically highly sensitive people. But what is it about INFJs that make them also highly sensitive? So we're going to look at some of the correlations with being INFJ, what it means to be INFJ, and how it correlates to also being a highly sensitive person. So if we look at just the INFJ as a whole, the letters, these indicate preferences. And as you know, this I stands for introverted, N stands for intuition, F stands for feeling, and J stands for judging. So INFJs are introverted. And what this means is that introverts need time alone in order to recharge and to gain their energy. And some of the questions correspond to, an INFJ will answer yes to a question when the question talks about introversion. So one of the questions is question 5. Do you always find yourself needing to withdraw during busy days into bed or in a darkened room or any other place where you can have privacy and relief from stimulation? And this question typically responds to introverts, and introverts will answer yes to this. Part of the definition of being introverted is the need to withdraw and have time alone in order to recharge. Extroverts get the energy from going outside and meeting people. So when an introvert talks to an extrovert, the extrovert feels charged and energized by the conversation, whereas the introvert may feel rather a bit drained. Another thing that defines introversion is, do you find it unpleasant to have a lot going on at once? And introverts as a whole prefer to focus on a topic or a series of topics where they can go into greater depth than extroverts. Extroverts would move around on the surface a lot more, interact with more people, as well as jump from topic to topic, and typically have a lot more going on than introverts. So for this question, a lot of INFJs would also answer yes too. So the next thing that we will look at today is, for this is judging, J, and judging, what the judging preference is. Not that INFJs judge people or they like to judge people, or anyone with a preference for J likes to judge people. Judging stands for a preference, or it means a preference for a structured external world. As you prefer to have your world at least a little bit more orderly, you have to have typically prefer to have a timetable, at least a loose plan that you can adhere to, that at least you know what's coming. For example, many of you coming today, I try to give as much information about the meeting as possible so you all know what to expect, because it's hard to react to last minute things, and you kind of know, I guess, for those of you here for the first time, you would like to know what you're in for, what kind of environment you're going to eat in, what the kind of people you're going to meet, and part of that is also doing this video so you get to see what the type of things we do in these meetups. So the questions which would correlate to a preference for judging is, are you conscientious? Question 12. Judging, people preference judging have a more structured external world, and also tend to be quite conscientious. They like things a little bit more close-ended and want to see things through to completion, and that's how they prefer to have their life structured. Another question which would be also something that they may like to, they would correlate to saying yes to is, do you get rattled when you have a lot to do in a short amount of time? And people with a preference for P, perceiving, like to leave things a little bit open-ended. And we talked a little bit about this before. Someone with a preference for P, if this is time 0 and this is your deadline. Someone with a preference for J would kind of be a little bit more structured and work towards their goal in a more linear fashion. And INFJs do this to some extent, not as much as ISTJs or ISFJs, which are a lot more structured. But someone with a preference for P, sorry if you can see over here, not move around, will move to the deadline. They will still be figuring out what they want to do, and the last minute they'll kind of get all their work done and maybe pull all-nighters. And they get their comfort from having things a little bit more open-ended all the way up to the deadline. Okay, another question that many of you may also have answered yes to would be question 24. Do you make it a high priority to arrange your life to avoid upsetting or overwhelming situations? And this also corresponds to having things planned, or at least mentally prepared for what you're about to get into. So you would kind of visualize what's going to happen so you can avoid last minute crashes at the end, which you may feel overwhelmed by. So we looked for first the I and the J. If you said yes to all 5 of these questions, you would already have a score of 5 just by looking at preferences. But again, we've talked a lot about this in my earlier sessions. It's all about the cognitive functions. So I'm going to run through them a little bit more. First function for an INFJ is introverted intuition, followed by extroverted feeling. The third one is introverted thinking. And the fourth one is extroverted sensing. So what's all this mean? It's not your periodic table. It's the notation for the cognitive functions. So what we look at is introverted intuition. And I'm going to draw a funnel here. So introverted intuition, and I'll run through this again because it's definitely worth taking note of, is the strongest function for an INFJ. And I will use red. So if you look at the size of your bars, these are kind of like your aptitude or something. Introverted intuition would be the strongest function, followed by the extroverted feeling, and introverted thinking, and extroverted sensing. It's kind of the strength of your mental functions, how your mind works. So introverted intuition is a convergent function, and it's very big picture. It works like a funnel. So you have a lot of information in the world, and INFJs are typically always trying to come up with a theory for everything. A theory of everything with regards to people. INTJs will look at theory, everything like black holes in the universe and chaos theory, string theory. They're a bit more into that science world. The INFJs look like theory of life, meaning of life is very important to an INFJ. Meaning, especially deep insights into people and humanity, is what creates meaning. And INFJs are champions basically at creating meaning from seemingly meaningless, disconnected and unconnected situations. So everything you see in the world feeds into this funnel, and you have a lot of information. At the same time, because your preference for J, all this information is trying to converge. So you've seen like a funnel, how water may just go. You're trying to get everything you come across with, every single perhaps conversation, experience, and emotion that you've ever felt is spinning around in your head. Your brain is logically trying to make sense of all the information, and it's all trying to converge on something, a meaning to what you've experienced. And this is why INFJ's mind is extremely complicated, because everything you have is feelings and thoughts are kind of converging. As a result, INFJs would also score yes in areas and subtleties, such as subtleties in the environment, yes to a rich complex in the life, yes to being perfectionistic as this thing kind of funnels down and you're trying to reach a singular solution to a complex problem, as well as life changes. So yes to questions 2 and 8, do you seem to be aware of subtleties in your environment? And you have a rich complex in the life? invariably, the rich complex inner life is what defines an INFJ. I would say that out of the 16 types, the INFJ is the most complex type as a result of how the mind functions. And this is kind of, by looking at all 16 types, there's a reason why you may not feel like you fit in the world, because your mind just works and wired completely different from 99% of the population who cannot understand that rich complex inner life that you have. They just can't. They're just wired differently. This whole trying to explain what's going on in your mind to people, you probably get lost somewhere up here. And you say, hang on, I've still got a lot more theory to explain to you. I still want to go into a bit more depth. You're like, no, it's enough already. It's above my head. It's too much. I don't want to go down there into that complicated ideas for a lot of people. Another thing is why this is also affects you, INFJ's tendency to be perfectionistic and trying hard to avoid making mistakes or forgetting things. Conversion is a singular solution. They're looking for one answer. J is like a structured external world. You prefer things to be structured. And this is also something that you try hard to do to not to make a mistake with a J and this funnel going on. You don't want to make a mistake. Yes. So everyone here feels like they have a perfectionistic tendency in some way?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I think that resonates pretty well. And same thing with this, changes in your life shake you up. You don't want things changing too fast around you because your mind is already spinning. You don't want the external world to be changing too much either, because you're trying to make sense of the existing information which you have and your life experiences. If you change things around, you're like, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this funnel. Don't introduce new information. That is something that can happen, and you get overwhelmed. So now we're going to look at the second function, which is extroverted feeling. You combine this deep insight with extroverted feeling, which is kind of shared values and the feelings of other people, the feelings of the room, the kind of group situation you're in. You actually have a deep insight into the values of other people around you. And that what makes an INFJ very good at kind of occupations such as therapy and counseling. You'd be looking at one person one-to-one, and you would kind of figure out what they're going through and look very deeply into what's going on. So you can look deeply into people's moods and the pain they're going through. But the flip side of this, you also can get upsetting scenes and violence affecting you very deeply. Like maybe horror movies or violence or gore, disturbing, traumatic incidences, abuse cases. These can really affect an INFJ quite deeply. Good thing is you can also see the meaning in art and music. You can appreciate the beauty and the depth and complexity there. This can also allow you to be nervous. So for the questions 3 and 4, the other people's moods affect you and you're sensitive to pain. Also, it's quite likely the answer may be that yes for these questions. Deeply moved by the arts or music, questions 10 and 22. Do you notice enjoy delicate and fine sense, taste, sounds, and works of art? So it's often said that INFJs have a very sensitive palate, sensitive to different tastes in food or fine food or whiskey or coffee or teas, and you can notice these subtleties that's going on in your physical world. So are INFJs the most sensitive type? I mean, most people here in this room typed as highly sensitive according to this test. I'm going to look at the third function now, introverted thinking. Introverted thinking is third function. It works largely subconsciously. It works with these other functions. And what it does in an INFJ is to look at these logically consistent singular train of thoughts, and that is not constrained by external boundaries. So what this means is that, remember I talked a lot about the funnel, the introverted intuition funnel. So when you're throwing a thought into this funnel, at the same time you're trying to work out, does this idea, this theory, this concept fit into my big picture? If not, I'm going to throw it out. So whereas an INTP with an introverted thinking function, first we'll explore that idea for a long time. If it doesn't fit, you're going to discard it. You're going to keep discarding all this stuff that doesn't fit into your big picture until you've kind of filtered out the cream, kind of filtered out the juice, the truth of everything that you have ever experienced. You're going to throw them out because it doesn't fit into your big picture. What this also means is that if you can't figure out whether it's true or not, you can't figure out what I'm saying is true or not, it's going to create these open loops. So Jay, you kind of want to have a situation where your loop is closed and you can kind of, scratch that off. So when you go around in the world, you go around experiencing life, you talk to people, they're going to tell you all kinds of ideas, you're going to get all kinds of stuff, and you can't figure out whether it's true or not. And what this does is create these open loops. You're still exploring it. Doesn't mean what they're saying is true, you just haven't reached a conclusion of it. You kind of keep exploring these ideas, and you can keep creating these open loops. At the same time, these open loops are fed into a funnel. You've got loads of them going on inside your funnel that's trying to converge. And what that does, make your mind a very crowded place. You would rather have these group closed off and you can discard them. You close another loop. You can keep it if it's a gem. You like MBTI theory, keep it. You'll go into your back pocket for when you need to understand people or you need to understand yourself. So anything you come across will be either discarded or kept. But you've got loads of these. I don't know how many, but you're going to have plenty. You've got all these open loops going on in your brain. So where we get to some of the crux, and a lot of yeses would come out for this, is this SE function, extroverted sensing. So INFJs have very weak extroverted sensing function. It's kind of these pairs work in tandem. You're very strong in having deep insights into situations and people, but at the same time, bringing them out in the real world, knowing how to make your dream or theory a reality is going to be very hard because the extroverted sensing function is small and you haven't got much of an aptitude of how to do that. So because your extroverted sensing function is weak, you will always live a life that's odds with the physical world. You have a combative relationship with the physical world. So what this means is that you may have a low capacity for sensory input. So extroverted sensing is the 5 senses in the here and now. And these 5 senses are sight, touch, taste, smell, and hearing. And as a result, if there's too much visually going on, you may get overloaded. If there's a lot of things happening around you in touch and physical sensations, that may also overwhelm you because you haven't got much aptitude yet. You've got a lot of aptitude for theories and understanding complex situations, but when it comes to the physical world, that's going to be a struggle. Taste, smell. Some INFJs I know are very sensitive to smell and unpleasant odors especially, and can get very put off. At the same time, noise. Noise is a big one. Live in a big busy city, the noise of the crowd around you can really overwhelm your 5 senses, and as a result, INFJs do have to recuperate and recharge a lot at home. So the questions you may probably have answered yes to, and certainly quite a lot of them. Are you easily overwhelmed by strong sensory input? Are you particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine? 7, are you easily overwhelmed by things like bright lights, strong smells, coarse fabrics, and sirens close by? Are you comfortable by loud noises? Does your nervous system sometimes feel so frazzled that you have to go off by yourself? Do you startle easily? And sometimes you go up to a knife edge and jump or something happens and you just feel really overwhelmed by that. It's the effects of being startled can definitely happen. And other 3 questions which correspond to a weak extroverted sensing function is: do you become implicitly aroused when there's a lot going on around you? Are you bothered by intense stimuli like loud noises or chaotic scenes? So all these questions which I've highlighted, guess what your score would be? 23. So are INFJs the most sensitive type? And that is a question which I've been looking at as well. And based on these functions, and you look at how the mind works, a weak sensing function that only happens in INTJs as well. You have an extroverted feeling function, which is a sponge for the emotions of the room, of other people. You take that on board onto yourself, and you have no filter for that typically. Because the way your brain is wired is to suck information in to this funnel. You're going to suck everything in. As a result, the good and the bad get sucked in, and you end up being very sensitive. Personally, I think INFJs are the most sensitive type and would score the highest on this particular test.